Hello everyone, welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. In our last episode, we delved into the relationship between the Monster Federation and various nations. In this episode, we will be discussing Demon Lord Ramiris and her underground labyrinth. Firstly, let's briefly revisit the background of Ramiris. Ramiris is one of the ancient deities. It was Star King Dragon Veldnava, the creator of Multiverse and also Malim's father, who named her Ramiris. As the original Queen of Spirits, she had the authority to bestow divine protection on heroes, uphold the balance of the world, and was greatly revered amongst all spirits and fairies. The bond between Guy, Malim, and Ramiris runs incredibly deep. When Malim's pet dragon was killed, she became uncontrollably enraged, nearly destroying everything in her path. Guy and Ramiris attempted to mediate. Guy, playing his part, battled Malim on an equal footing, but he knew that if their clash continued, Malim would overpower him. That was when Ramiris stepped in, absorbing Malim's demonic energy. This incident caused Ramiris to fall from her status as the Queen of Spirits to becoming a fairy, and ultimately transforming into a demon lord. Since then, Ramiris embarked on a perpetual loop of reincarnation and death. Whenever her life reached its end, she would reincarnate as a child, carrying forward her past memories and personality. As Ramiris matures, her strength would gradually return to its former glory. Despite her childlike appearance and yet to be restored powers, Ramiris still possesses remarkable abilities. One of her unique skills is mazecraft. As for this mazecraft, it's essentially a diminished version of Veldnava's world-creating capability. Additionally, Ramiris's Labyrinth, along with Sarian's Sacred Tree and the Heaven Tower in the Barren Land, remain in this world as heritages of Veldnava. Now, let's discuss Ramiris's relocation and the construction of the Monster Federation's underground labyrinth. When Rimuru had just returned to the Monster Federation from Malmau's residence, he received a thought communication from Manga. Wondering about the possible disturbance, Rimuru found himself swiftly back in the Monster Federation. Outside the western gate, it seemed the construction worker, a goblin named Gobkio, was having an argument with someone. From amidst the dispute, a childlike voice, emanating from a small figure about 30 centimeters tall, proclaimed the land had been claimed. Behind her, a previously unseen log cabin stood prominently outside the Monster Federation's western entrance. Alarmingly, the guards who usually stood vigilant by the gates were now all sprawled on the ground, fast asleep. The 30-centimeter figure in question was not some oddity, but one of the Octogram Demon Lords, the Fairy Queen Ramiris. Observing her quarrel with the gatekeepers, Rimuru stealthily approached from behind, grabbing her and greeting her. Ramiris reacted with a start, her gaze darting about as if trying to hide something. It was only after the demon Beretta provided an explanation that Rimuru truly understood what had transpired. Apparently, Ramiris was keen on relocating to the Monster Federation at any cost, a sentiment strongly echoed by the tree fairy, Miss Trainee. Without official permission, they went ahead and erected a log cabin outside the Monster Federation capital city gate, intending it to serve as the new entrance to the underground labyrinth. The guard station nearby had fallen prey to a sleep spell cast by Trainee. At this juncture, Rimuru lightly reprimanded Ramiris. While she tried to laugh it off, the implications were rather serious. After all, establishing one's own domain within another demon lord's territory could lead to an inexcusable conflict, or even war. However, upon inspecting the cabin, a thought struck Rimuru. In prior conversations with Malmau, it was mentioned that in order to draw people back to the city multiple times, there needed to be a central, captivating attraction. Whether an opera house or a coliseum, they would serve this purpose. Yet, repetitive events would eventually become mundane. Considering most visitors to the city were merchants and adventurers, what if a labyrinth were created here, releasing monsters within? Wouldn't that draw a multitude of adventurers eager for a challenge? Upon reaching this point, Rimuru gave Ramiris a mischievous smile and offered her a proposition. He suggested she create a large underground labyrinth beneath the arena, and in return, he would grant her full management rights over it. This would give Ramiris both a residence and a job. Furthermore, Rimuru saw an opportunity to benefit from adventurers who would explore the maze. Upon hearing this, Ramiris's eyes widened in astonishment, and she let out a shriek as if she had been struck by lightning. Trainee was moved to tears of joy for Ramiris, elated that her master was no longer a jobless shut-in. With those arrangements settled, the next challenge was designing an engaging labyrinth. According to Ramiris, the maze could stretch 100 levels deep, and its construction would only take 100 hours. Within the labyrinth, while she couldn't create life directly, Ramiris could mold almost everything else to her will. Whether it was altering the maze's structure or resurrecting adventurers who perished within, she could effortlessly perform such astounding feats. Hearing this, Rimuru was struck with an audacious idea. He wanted to recreate dungeons from RPG games of his original world. For instance, using the magicules released by Veldora, he could naturally spawn monsters of various strengths within the maze. Starting from the first level, the monster's strength would gradually increase, and these creatures would provide materials to ignite the adventurous spirit of the explorers. Moreover, every 10 levels would feature a powerful monster, a so-called boss level. Defeating these bosses would not only grant adventurers a special reward chest containing powerful equipment, but also access to a save point where they could rest. By this point, the primary elements of the dungeon were set. Rimuru and Ramiris then invited Veldora to reside on the labyrinth's final level, serving as the ultimate archboss, while unleashing his long-suppressed immense aura. Subsequently, monsters would continuously spawn within the maze, and if they pledged loyalty to Ramiris, they would gain an undying attribute. As long as they remained within the labyrinth, they were immortal beings. A few days later, they moved on to the next phase, contemplating the internal structure of the underground labyrinth. Even though it was already an architectural marvel that defied common sense, as an RPG dungeon, it still lacked some essential features, like traps and diverse terrains. Rimuru brainstormed various traps like poison darts, pitfall traps, shifting terrains, and mimic chests. He also had exciting ideas for room and floor designs. He thought of rooms filled with monsters that would ambush adventurers as soon as they entered. Another idea was to have floors covered in lava, challenging the adventurers to adapt and survive in these extreme conditions. But when the idea of creating rooms simulating natural disasters came up, Ramiris showed a rare disagreement, feeling that it was impossible for her alone to sustain such massive energy. However, just then, an unexpected voice chimed in.
We could just fetch some fire dragons or ice dragons from somewhere. Want me to get them?
Turning around, Rimuru saw Meline with her signature pink twin tails. Surprisingly, she was there in the yet-to-be-announced bottom layer of the labyrinth. The moment their eyes met, Meline, with her youthful and flat-chested figure, puffed up with slight indignation. She felt left out, as Rimuru and others planned this fascinating project without involving her, a fellow companion. Rimuru hastily explained that they began preparations discreetly because they had received a letter from Meline. At this, Meline's mood instantly brightened, and the two long-separated friends caught up with each other. Since the last Walpurgis banquet, both the Beast King Carrion and Sky Queen Frey had come under Meline's rule. Their original 3 kingdoms had merged into one large nation. Now, with Frey's assistance, Meline spent her days learning to handle national affairs and seldom had time for fun. This time, she had sneaked out without Frey's knowledge. Rimuru gently reminded Meline that she might get scolded by Frey for this. However, Meline was adamant about participating in the labyrinth's construction. Confidently, Meline declared she could catch dragons, making it sound as simple as catching bugs.
What types are there? Is there a connection between true dragons and the term dragon species?
Curious, Rimuru asked. But upon hearing this, both Meline and Veldora protested vehemently, clarifying that true dragons and regular dragons are entirely different concepts. At their core, dragons were derived from deteriorated factors of Veldnava, the creation god and elder brother of the storm dragon, who was Meline's father. More precisely, they originated from the element dragon, a pet Veldnava gifted to his daughter Meline. This cherished element dragon was killed by someone, and after its death, it turned into a chaos dragon, releasing the dragon factor. Even now, lesser dragons would still be born in places with high concentrations of magicules. Those with a dense dragon factor would become archdragons. If these dragons evolved and survived for a few centuries, they would become dragon lords, representing the 4 dragon attributes and possessing greater wisdom. These dragon lords, with strength comparable to demon lords, had evolved into almost spiritual entities. However, these dragons had been fundamentally different from the true dragons. Once their physical bodies had died, they couldn't be resurrected. Melim had indicated that, even for her, capturing the prideful dragon lords would have been a challenge. But she had suggested that if she couldn't secure a dragon lord, she could have brought dragons that were on the brink of evolving into dragon lords. As dragons had a nesting nature and would transform their territories into environments they liked, by capturing nearly evolved dragon lords and allowing them to live in the labyrinth, they could naturally transform its internal sections into different elemental tiers. By that time, whether it was a layer engulfed in high-temperature flames, a frost layer where one would have frozen to death if they stopped moving, or a layer that felt like being in a thunderstorm forest, everything could have been easily achieved. These sub-elemental dragons would have served as mini-bosses in the challenging layers 96 to 99 of the labyrinth. Veldora, the storm dragon, had enthusiastically mentioned these layers near his gate as having a final boss feel. Imagining the future scenario, everyone had been satisfied. As long as the dragons were in place, it would have become a reality. Entrusting this task to Melim, Rimuru had never doubted the probability of success. Thus, Melim had embarked on her joyful dragon hunting journey. Meanwhile, during Melim's dragon hunting, Rimuru and his team hadn't fallen behind on the labyrinth's modifications, quickly setting up various intricate traps. During that time, Beretta, who had served as the workforce, approached Rimuru with a proposal to place the best puppet equipment they had confiscated from Clayman in the labyrinth's treasure chests as rewards. The artisan group also produced a large number of equipment for placement within the maze. With that, the labyrinth's preparation had essentially been completed, and Rimuru and his team began their final inspection. Overall, out of fear of losing players due to excessive difficulty, the first 5 layers of the labyrinth only had complicated paths, allowing even novice adventurers to progress easily. From the 6th to the 9th layer, some simple trap elements were added. But starting from the boss on the 10th layer, the difficulty had gradually increased with powerful monsters making their appearance. Traps like mimics disguised as treasure chests were also implemented. However, for gameplay experience, every 5th layer was designed as a safe zone, with inns and the sale of adventuring goods, continuing this way up until layers 96 to 99, which served as the layers of the 4 dragon lords. The 100th layer was personally guarded by the storm dragon, Veldora. After inspecting this vast labyrinth, evil grins appeared on the faces of Rimuru and his team, and they nodded to each other in agreement. And so, at the end of that winter, the fresh labyrinth and Colosseum had stood ready in the snow, awaiting the spring festival's arrival. That's all for this video. If you liked it, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and share. In the next episode, we'll discuss the audience ceremonies with various groups during the Tempest Founding Festival. See you in the next one.